What's going on, guys? I'm John Hasselbauer, golf writer for thelines.com, and in this video we'll be going over the 2023 Arnold Palmer Invitational. It is the fourth elevated event of the 2023 season following the Century Tournament of Champions, the WM Phoenix Open, the Genesis Invitational, and now the API. It follows up a kind of lackluster Honda Classic, as was to be expected. That was sort of like a players bye week. The players, instead of basically every good player in the world, has played at the Seminole sort of Pro-Am member guest situation that happened on Monday. So all of the game's best are now in Florida, and they will be teeing it up this Thursday. Before we get any further, make sure that you are subscribed to the Limes YouTube channel that continues to grow even despite football season being over. It is golf in full swing now that we have elevated event after elevated event with the players next week. I think we're going to do a little bit extra bonus content for the players next week, some mega casts and some deeper dives into the field, since I know that is the fifth major, essentially one of my favorite courses in TPC Sawgrass. So really looking forward to that one, but don't want to get ahead of ourselves because it is API week. Before we get any further into API, as always, we'll look back at the Honda Classic. And we'll touch on Live a little bit because you can't really ignore that also happened and that the field was considerably better at Live, although the drama was quite less. So Honda Classic, your winner was Chris Kirk in a playoff. A theme that just continues to prevail in golf in 2023 is a sort of like, I'm not going to call this David versus Goliath because Chris Kirk is not Goliath, but Eric Cole is definitely David. And we've had a lot of these, where did this guy come from, contenders in basically every event of 2023. And the better player is prevailing every single time, which is kind of frustrating for people who want to bet outrights. I know Eric Cole was a popular outright bet, somebody who I kind of missed on because not somebody who's going to jump out in any sort of strokes gain metric. But people who did their research knew that he was extremely familiar with Florida and with PGA National specifically. So kudos to those guys. I need to step up my research game beyond the strokes gain, look for the narratives, look for the home bed narratives. I think we have a few of those this week at Bay Hill. So kudos to everybody. I hope you had an each way on him or a top 5, a top 10 on Eric Cole, because I know there were a lot of tickets out there. A lot of tickets on Chris Kirk as well. He was a guy I talked about in this video last week that I loved him and would have bet him if the number was there. I was out golfing on President's Day, so if there were 30s or 34s or 35s, I missed it, and it's easy to say in hindsight that if I would have been there at a 35, I think I probably would have been, to be honest, but by the time I looked at the board, it was 24. So maybe a missed opportunity there on Kirk, but also kind of thankful that I didn't have to sweat that, because when he dropped it in the water and nearly took a windshield out of that Honda Civic on 18, I'm sure everybody thought they were left for dead. So kudos to Chris Kirk, an easy guy to root for. He's been knocking on the door for about 8 years. Really repeatable swing and a consistent ball striker. Really as consistent as they come in 2023. When you look at his strokes gain metrics, he's like a top 5 from tee to green guy, and he does very well in Florida. So the pick made sense, a little too short for me. So I wasn't there, but I think the process is still in a good place, and happy for everybody else who hit an outright on him. Also last week was Live Mayakoba. I love Mayakoba. I'm still repping Mayakoba here and here. One of my favorite golf complexes. If you've never been, as far as like resort golf goes, it's like one of the most beautiful amenities I've ever been to. It is a little bit of a pricey round, but not a long course. When it's tipped out, I think it's 6,800, 6,900. But really, really claustrophobic, not a driver course, which is not the best fit for me. I didn't post a good score there, but I do love that course. And despite how much I love the course, I didn't watch a minute of Live. I think it's impossible to put your Live thoughts on Twitter as honest or objective as, or as you can be, whether you are or not, or you have your bias, whatever. Anything you put on Twitter, the live crowd kind of takes it and runs with it. So I figured maybe this is the better forum to talk a little bit about, my thoughts on live. Because yeah, if you tweet I don't like live, then the natural response is, well, you're talking a lot about it, so you must actually really care about it. I don't care about the golf itself. I didn't watch a minute of it. I could have I should say I could easily have watched it, but it's actually a lot harder to get to it now. I don't have cable. I don't subscribe to a broadcast package, so I can't just put CW on my TV, and I'm not going out of my way to download the CW app for something that I don't care about. So it was easier for me to check in like passively when it was on YouTube. Now I don't care enough. I also can't bet on it, which is everything that we talk about here. If I could bet on live, I'm sure I would throw a little Sebastian Munoz first round leader, a little Mito outright for the good old days. But I don't care about watching rich overpaid golfers get paid even more. And I think that's really the overarching sentiment from last week, because it was two very polarizing conclusions. And one was a full field that went to the very last hole into a playoff with Chris Kirk versus Eric Cole, two non-household names who, if you don't, I follow golf every week. I didn't know who Eric Cole was before this week. So two kind of nobodies, and yet the drama was still compelling because you could tell how much this 34-year-old journeyman needed this win and how much his life was going to change if he earned first place and went out and won a golf tournament against a bunch of PGA Tour professionals. So that was kind of palpable watching that there were implications going into this final stretch. You have to get a par. You have to get a birdie. You have to get a par on all of the bear trap holes. You got to get a birdie on the last hole to win it. And ultimately, you're watching this guy nervously hit these shots. It's kind of relatable. Like, I would be very nervous trying to close out an event when it's right in front of you like that too. His mom is there. Like, there's just a lot of drama for a tournament that's field was not impressive, and we knew this was a sort of bye week where all the best players weren't going to be there. But Eric Cole nearly won an event that Shane Lowry and Sung Jae Im were in, so that's impressive. And then on the other hand, you have Charles Howell III, who was nowhere to be found on PGA Tour leaderboards for the last 5 years. As long as I've covered golf since 2020 and followed it long before that, I've never seen Charles Howell on a Sunday in a final pairing going down the stretch. So he's sort of this journeyman guy who is just okay. An obvious decision to go to live for him because the best days are behind him. And whenever somebody wins a live event, I just say he established a 54-hole lead after 3 days. So cool. There was no drama. There's no Charles Howell fans out there who are excited that he won. This did nothing to grow Liv's footprint, watching Charles Howell play significantly better than a bunch of mediocre golfers. And Cam Smith has been irrelevant for the last, I think he had a couple missed cuts going into this, and now he wasn't a factor in this. DJ didn't look very sharp at all. If that continues, look, I'm not going to say I'm not going to bet these live guys at the Masters. I think Cam Smith is always going to show up at Augusta and play well, and I think the same for DJ. And if these guys continue to play poorly and not impress in live, I'm happy to take a future buy low on these guys at the Masters. I'm not saying that once you join live, you're a terrible golfer, but once you've joined live, I no longer care about the implications of anything you're doing on a week-to-week basis until you're playing a 72-hole event. So now there's no live for a few weeks. I don't know when the next event is. I'll also be not watching that one. But it's nice that we could turn the page to all the best PGA Tour players being in one place at this elevated event this week, and then we get it again next week at the Players Championship. So that is last week. Now we're going to switch ahead to the week ahead at Bay Hill for the Arnold Palmer Invitational. So if you've been reading my tournament previews every week, thank you again. Always appreciate the support. The link to that article is in the description of this video. Something I did want to just call out for this week. You're probably familiar with everything you need to know article that goes out every Sunday. Something new that we're going to start to do going forward is kind of link at this point here, once we get to the introduction of the course. If you click this, you will be linked out to this evergreen page. And the goal going forward is that that evergreen page is always there before my article previews go out, but a week out from the tournament, if you just want to kind of get ready for what the next week's all about. This is all evergreen information that's not going to change regardless of field or anything else. This is going to show you odds as soon as they become available, which, as soon as we hit Monday morning, odds are going to be on this page. There are projections here which need to be updated more regularly, but that will be, if the field is released on Friday, the goal would be that I put my odds projections right here for the top 5 to start, and then you've got your course preview overview, and then the course specs that would have typically been in the tournament preview article are now going to live here, and then the betting trends will also live here. But this is all evergreen stuff. It's not going to change regardless of field. And that allows the tournament preview article to really be adjusted for everything that's going on in the field week to week. So that was a slight change to the content. It's all the same information. It's just in 2 different places. And the goal is just to get that information out sooner because the actual tournament preview article is reliant on getting the actualized field available and confirmed and modeled so that we can dig into who's playing and who we like the most. So going into Bay Hill now, with that all said, it is one of the longer courses on tour, just under 7,500 yards. It is one of the most difficult courses on tour, with winning scores in the single digits under par in, 2 of the last 3 years. Both of those 2 of the last 3 years have been extremely windy. It is a par 72 with 4 par 5, so we do expect all the players to score on those par 5s, which is why scoring in general in the non-windy windy years is going to get to your sort of low teens, 12, 11 under par. But if the wind picks up at all, this is maybe the toughest test beyond some of the majors even. In Orlando, Florida, very highly susceptible to the wind. And yeah, it's really determined the outcome of this event. So keeping an eye out for the weather report, looking at wave splits is something I honestly, I hate to do it, because I'm somebody who Monday morning, I just want to see who's playing and bet the guys who have the best number. And when you take wind splits into account, it's kind of like, okay, I like this guy, but I'm not going to play him if he goes off Thursday morning, because then he's going to have to play in this Friday afternoon super high wind forecast situation. So it takes a lot of patience and discipline to do it that way. I can't believe I'm sitting here Tuesday and haven't filled out my betting card yet, but that is the case. I'm still waiting to see the tee times released, and I do very much anticipate there being a distinct advantage for players who go out on the late afternoon Thursday and then can tee up Friday morning before the high winds kick in Friday afternoon. And we're seeing up to 30-mile-an-hour winds on Friday and a similar forecast on Saturday. In the end, it might not be a significant difference, but it definitely looks like an advantage that everybody who plays Thursday is basically not going to be severely impacted by wind, and half the field who plays later on Friday will be severely impacted by the wind. Now, this happened at the Players. We thought going in, we knew what the advantage was going to be for a wave, and then they suspended play because the rain and the weather was too bad. I don't know that we'll get some suspended rain in this instance, some suspended play in this instance. It doesn't look that bad. It's just wind. It's not rain. But it's definitely something to monitor, and a reason why I've placed some bets already. But to close out my card when I'm a little 50-50 on guys, I'm just going to look at the tee times and let that decide who I'm sort of on the fence on. And then obviously from a DFS perspective, we have until Wednesday night to lock those in. So that'll definitely be taken account for my strategy here. Aside from the wind, just touching on the greens here, they are firm and fast Bermuda, some of the firmest we see on the PGA Tour. There's already reports that guys are hitting into these greens, and it sounds like concrete, and they're bouncing 12 feet in the air, and they're impossible to hold with long iron. So it's going to be carnage, and you definitely have to have a combination of both good ball striking to pierce it through the wind, but also a reliable short game for scrambling, as is always the case on difficult scoring conditions. The rough, really, really thick rough, possibly the thickest rough that we see on the PGA Tour. It's not Bermuda rough where you get more of that like slippery challenge. This is just deep, like balls are going to be submerged in this. It's very reminiscent of a U.S. Open sort of venue. So it's long. People have taken the bomb and gouge approach here. Bryson obviously famously taking that horseshoe par 5 head on, trying to drive the green, nearly did. That was must-see TV. I missed that. But Rory's done the same thing. This is the type of course where there are trees and angles that you can take over the trees if you want to be aggressive. Like not a good comp whatsoever, but Colonial Country Club is an event where we've started to see over the last couple of years the Bombers, instead of like playing the course the way it's intended to and laying up into dog legs, the guys who can hit a high, long ball off the tee are actually going over these trees, taking aggressive lines and generating scoring opportunities. That's something we saw Jason Kokrak do when he beat Jordan Spieth. It's something that we saw Sam Burns do when he won Colonial the year before. So it's not a comp, but it's just a reference point for what the longer hitters in the modern game are starting to do to these tree-lined courses. And something that I think gives a distinct advantage to the driving distance elite this week. Looking at the comp courses this week. So Colonial, not a comp. I'm not listing it here. You can get away with being very short off the tee. Here, Quail Hollow is one that I think is probably the best example of a long, difficult, challenging, firm and fast Bermuda, thick penal rough, southeast region of the United States. I think it's a dead-on comp. It was the host of the President's Cup this week. We've seen players like Rory, like Quail Hollow, and here probably Rory's two most consistent venues on the PGA Tour. And we've seen players like Max Homa has very repeated history at both. Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, even more random players like Keith Mitchell and Gary Woodland, and Luke List. Even they've all had success at both, and it's sort of this premium driving course where you also need to be able to scramble and putt well on Bermuda. So I'm looking very closely at Quail Hollow. I think you could look at performance at the President's Cup. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but that is the most recent time we've seen Quail Hollow. And then last week's PGA National, there's not a lot of overlap in players who are playing both, but if you look good there, Shane Lowry, probably an example of that. You can bring a similar sort of game plan here, especially from a short game perspective. And then Innisbrook, where the Valspars played, the Concession, where we have the WGC in Florida. All very similar, like danger with water surrounding in Florida type of courses. Muirfield Village, a great example of firm and fast greens and thick Bermuda rough. Another one where short game might be pretty translatable, although that is bent grass, and we are in Bermuda this week. The Country Club, Bethpage Black, Wingfoot, Torrey Pines, Kiowa Island, and Augusta. Some of the most recent major venues that we've seen, and this is going to be reminiscent of a major. So I really want to see that not only did you play one particular major very well recently, but is your game traveling from major to major? The Open Championship, I didn't include any of those venues here, and that's mainly because wind hasn't really been a factor in recent Open Championships. When you look at St. Andrews and St. George's, where Colin Morikawa won, that was actually pretty calm in both of those years. So if the wind was up, that is a consistent through point that I might look at, but I don't think it's relevant here. So I'm really looking more at recent U.S. Open and PGA Championships specifically, and Augusta just as a challenging par 72 from that perspective with firm and fast greens. There's a little similarity there, but it's definitely not a perfect comp. Cool. And then going into the betting trends this week, just looking at the list of past winners. Not a ton of surprises. You see Scheffler, DeChambeau, Hatton, Molinari, and McIlroy all winning 55-1 or under. A couple back-to-back years of players amongst the favorites winning here. Obviously, Tiger Woods has won here a bunch. So you have to be a good player. You have to be well-rounded. You have to have strong results in major championships. I'd say Tyrrell Hatton's probably the one guy who doesn't have that sort of major pedigree like the other guys on this list do. But he's a guy who grinds in difficult conditions, so it's no surprise to see that he's playing well there. And course history in general is going to be important this week. It's something that is really the foundation of the research I'm looking at to refine a player pool on. This is an elevated event, and something that I want to look more closely at over the course of this year is who is always going to those events versus who is now only going there because they have to, because it's an elevated event and the top players have to show up. I thought that was interesting with Rory at the WM Phoenix Open, that he tends to always skip that event. He had to be there because it was elevated, and he chose to skip the Century, which he never likes to go to either. So he kind of forced himself to play the WM, and he didn't look good. And he kind of said in the interviews afterwards, like, this is not a place that suits my eye. I get in a lot of trouble with wayward tee shots here. So that's not a course I've always gone out of my way to play. Players this week, like Patrick Cantlay, has never played this event. He's always skipped it, and he's had trouble in Bermuda, possibly a matchup target for me. He looked good the week before, but he's going to an event where he's basically having like his hands forced to play. I don't love that, and that's something I'm probably going to target against or just fade my exposure for. Other guys like Justin Thomas has only played here once. Xander Schauffele has only played here once. Jon Rahm, interestingly enough, only played here for the first time last year. And he finished T17. He ball struck it really well, struggled with the short game, and he's never won in the United States east of Chicago or wherever Olympia Fields is. So I don't know. That's interesting. Maybe that's something. Maybe just maybe, when we are on the East Coast swing, we don't have to worry as much about Jon Rahm. I know he's won everywhere in the world, and that's probably not true, but we were trying to bet this event, and I need to feel good about not betting him, so that is what I'm going with. Okay, that is all of our pre-tournament preview. Let's move it on to the model for this week, and we'll jump into the spreadsheet and see everything that I'm prioritizing. Try to simplify this as best I can, so I won't go line by line, but the important things we want to touch on here are scoring stats. So that's going to be just recent form entering this week. Bogey avoidance, I think, is huge. And then the big thing for Bay Hill is, can you score on these over 450-yard par fours? That's something that's consistent in tough venues and majors. Par five scoring is absolutely paramount here. You've got four of them. You got to capitalize. You got to play those under par all weekend. That's going to be your rare instances where you're able to capitalize on scoring, because outside of that, there are not many opportunities to make birdies here. And then long par fours, every par four, all four of them are over 200 yards. So definitely important to be someone who's comfortable in that area of your game. Comp conditions, again, both comp course history and course history are huge for me, and then difficult conditions as well to get that major history in there. Okay, so then next we have short game, which I have 21% of my weighting on. Strokes gained around the green, always important on a difficult track. And then putting, there's a lot of different nuances to this course compared to the West Coast swing. So I'm putting a weighted metric of fast Bermuda putting, just total putting over the last 36 rounds, general Bermuda putting, and then general fast greens. Combining that all together, and we can just take a quick look at who excels in those categories. It's Taylor Montgomery, Beau Hossler, Sam Burns, who I love this week, Andrew Putnam, and Tyrrell Hatton, who has had a lot of success here. So if you can putt well here, it's definitely not a putting contest, but it is something that I'll feel a little bit better about. It's so hard to get to the green, so once you're on the green, let that not be the most difficult part of the hole. Next, we have approach. So put a lot of emphasis on just general strokes gained approach, but also weighted proximity from 150 plus. A lot of that's concentrated in 200 plus here, but about 70% of the approaches are going to come from 150 plus. So definitely not a wedge course, and not a course where I want players who are, let's say, like a Tom Hoagie or a Russell Henley, who's elite from approach. Inside 150 yards. I don't really want those types of players to be skewed in the approach numbers. And you can kind of see, like, Cam Davis is not great from probably the shorter range, but is good in the longer range, going from 25 to third. Cameron Young, similar, someone who really thrives in the longer range approach. Even somebody like a Nate Lashley, Keegan Bradley, these guys are just not rating well at all in approach, but from 150 plus, they are a lot better. So just a different way to look at approach this week. And then driving, just general strokes gained off the tee and driving distance. You have your Kevin Kisners, your Kevin Nas, Christian Bezuidenhout, a lot of guys who've had success here who don't have driving distance. But if you look at the past winners, and if we even look at course history, I think you will see a little bit of correlation here. Rory McIlroy is the best course history. He's number one in this field in driving distance. Majority of the top 10 here are about top 50 in driving distance. Even Cameron Young has had a good result here. So if you're a Molinari or a Sungjae Im, you're you've got a lot to overcome if you're not coming in here with a distance advantage. So put that all together with all of these weights in mind. The top 10 of my model is Jon Rahm. That makes sense. Again, just for the narrative of him not really wanting to come here so much, I'm going to fade him and I'll probably regret it. Rory McIlroy is number 2, a better fit here. I said that at the Genesis and it didn't come to fruition. So we'll see. Sungjae Im looked a little disappointing at the Honda, maybe a good DFS consideration this week. I don't know how many people will jump back on him. Max Homa has this West Coast reputation, but he's actually very good in the Florida swing as well and trending better than most others this week. So he'll be interesting, somebody I'm thinking about betting. Xander Schauffele, not great on the Florida swing. I'll probably fade. Same with Patrick Cantlay at 6. Will Zalatoris, I love. He was my spotlight feature this week and somebody I'll have plenty of exposure to in both DFS. My first bet on my betting card this week. Scotty Scheffler, defending champion. We saw what he did as defending champion at WM. I think he's dangerous this week. And conditions actually look like they're going to be pretty similar to what we had last year. So can't ignore Scotty. I think he's a great fit. He's going to always play this event well. Tony Finau, number 9. I put him in that same group with Schauffele and Cantlay. He just hasn't really shown it in Florida, so probably a fade for me. And then Colin Morikawa, number 10, somebody that you wouldn't think about as a Florida specialist or anything of that nature. But he did win the concession, and if you can win there in a WGC, you can absolutely win at Bay Hill. So I have some interest in him. Moving into who I've bet. As I said at the top, this is a weird week with weather. I didn't want to get overzealous with the bets before I saw where everybody is playing. So I'll just start with who I've bet so far, which is 3 guys. Zalatoris, as I said, he was going to be an auto. No matter where he plays, I love his fit here. He has a top 10 already in his debut at this event. And anytime the conditions get difficult, he tends to show up, and he's coming off a top 5 finish at the Genesis. So love his chances here. He might be the most popular bet of the week. Was bet down. That says 33, but I got him at 30 to 1. And he's been bet down to probably like 22. So hopefully you got the number bright and early on Monday. Hideki Matsuyama, that's a value bet, 70 to 1. That's insane to me. I don't understand why he's all the way back there with the course history that he has and his prominence on short game, his results in majors. It just makes no sense why he would be 70 to 1. So I'm there 22 in my model and trending well. Not even like we're buying low on recent form. Like it just makes no sense. I love Hideki here. And then Sam Burns, we are in the Bermuda swing, Bermuda Burns. He can win an event with his putter. We saw his ranks in the weighted putting, top 3 in firm and fast, Bermuda green. So, this seems to be a good fit. He's someone who's either going to win or miss the cut. So maybe I'm a little less bullish in DFS if I'm trying to be more conservative, but, as an outright bet, I love it. 60 to 1 is crazy. I think he's slipping backwards. He was 50. He was 50 when odds opened, and I checked this morning and he was 60. So I'm doing it. Those guys are definitely on my card. And then I have a second tier of question marks because I just don't know where these guys are going to fall on the wave splits. But I think ultimately when we see who's teeing off on Thursday evening and Friday morning, if it's any of these guys, I'll start there. Hopefully all of these guys don't have the opposite split because then I don't know what I'm going to do. But I basically have room to either bet one of Homa or Morikawa. That would be a difficult decision for me and why I have not made it yet. Keegan Bradley is all the way down to 80 to 1 now. I'm really thinking about that. He has amazing history here. Definitely a placement bet that I want to put in. Definitely a first round leader bet that I want to have this week. Florida rested it and plays well in Florida and has putted the least bad on Bermuda. So I like him. I really like him at the Players next week too. So keeping an eye on that future. I was on him last year and he gave it a scare. So like Keegan in this stretch of the year. Cameron Young, bomber, difficult course, shows up in majors. I have a hard time, betting Zalatoris and not also being interested in Cam Young. So I feel like a lot of times when I bet one, I bet both. And Victor Hovland here. T2 last year at the API had a kind of a stranglehold on this tournament, and then the wind whipped up. It became a scrambling contest, and he couldn't keep up, which is too bad for Vic because I think he would have easily won this tournament last year if the conditions stayed down. But I actually do want to just pull up. Let's see if I can get to this. But if you look at the strokes gained from the last year's tournament, I think the assumption is you don't want to play Victor Hovland in a scrambling contest. If the winds whip up, that's bad for Vic, and that was true on Sunday. But if you look at the totality of the tournament, he still gained strokes around the green on a very demanding course, and he gained 10 strokes tee to green. He was third in the field in strokes gained tee to green. So he played this course really well, and all of his wins, if you look at them, are on windy courses. So he was my first sort of look when I went into this week. And if you look at his recent results here, it's not crazy. It's not awe-inspiring. At 13th at Pebble Beach is actually not the best look because that field was not good. And you would like to see him finish top 10 against very little competition. But it's been all short game. The ball striking is there. He's somebody who can string together, top 5 after top 5. We've seen him go on those stretches, including at the Open. So he can do it in majors. The around the green is a little frightening. But every now and then he pops, and I feel like when the conditions get most difficult, he focuses more a little bit. Maybe there's something to that. But in any case, I do like Victor Hovland. And he was sort of my first thought before the tee times came out. So I'm kind of leaning that way. And then Taylor Pendrith, I'm going to bet one bomb. I don't think people should be betting bombs here. It's not very viable. But we've seen all these David and Goliath, Eric Cole type of situations where the random guy just tends to show up. So Taylor Pendrith's not that random. He was on the President's Cup team at Quill Hollow, a fit for long courses, and somebody who just with the strength of his driver alone as a bomber, can do some damage at this course. And he finished top 40 in his debut here last year. So that's it for now. I can't say that's my card because it is incomplete at the moment. But hopefully we get those tee times this afternoon. I can lock this up. When I do, make sure you are subscribed to the Lines Discord channel because I always put my bets in there as soon as I place them. There's a link to that in the description below as well. That's going to do it for me this week. Thank you guys so much for listening in. Go Knicks, stay hot, and good luck with your API bets this week.